The first generation 40nm FinFET design Ryzen CPUs was scheduled to span from laptops through servers and high-end desktops, with 60% IPC improvement, superior power efficiency, better cache system and bridge prediction, with no shared floating point units between cores, and with updated high number execution resources compared to previous Bulldozer family. The Ryzen chipset is a very different, well-designed creation than its predecessors. Furthermore, AMD never gave up the idea that high numbers of multiple simultaneous threads, as we know today, SMT, is the future, not only for workstation applications but also for gaming. In February of 2017, the launch of Ryzen CPUs code-named Zen was a bit bumpy, with some memory speed compatibility issues that were resolved after some BIOS updates. That wasn't enough to discourage the early adopters and AMD's fans from purchasing the Zen lineup. The first generation of Ryzen CPUs had a successful debut, with high sales and increased market share and revenue, fighting head-to-head with Intel's processors. The reviews from digital press and YouTube tech community was definitely positive, especially for the mid and high-end products. Even though Intel still was the winner in single-core applications and PC gaming, AMD took the lead in multi-threaded workloads. Ryzen 7 chips were tough to ignore, especially for those in need of sheer computing power. Overclockers were happy to discover that all Ryzen processors was unlocked, in contrast to Intel's only limited selection of K models. And of course, the cherry on the cake was the price. AMD's mid-tier 6-core 12-thread Ryzen 5 1600, priced back then for $225, was neck and neck in performance with Intel's 4-core 4-threads Core i5 7600K, priced for $250. AMD's 8-core 16-thread CPUs began from $330, while the cheapest at the time Intel's 8-core 16-thread processor was more than 3 times the cost. The same price-to-performance ratio followed also suit for the higher-tier Threadripper and Epic models. After 7 years of obscurity, AMD finally had discovered an architecture that could seriously compete with Intel. To counter AMD's comeback, Intel forced to terminate the i7 4-cores 8-threads lineup and promoted for first time i7 processors with 6 cores 12 threads for $380, aiming exclusively the mainstream desktop market. And with that, AMD forced Intel to react, changing a stale for years CPU market, liberating PC users from the dark ages of Intel's high-end 4-cores processors. That was a well-played, successful turnaround story by AMD, and quite frankly, the Ryzen architecture in 2017 brought also back the lost excitement to try out a fresh CPU technology. To retrospectively celebrate AMD's comeback, or better put, Ryzen, we decided to test the Zen architecture with some modern gaming titles and few synthetic rendering tasks. Thus, we brought to the light the smaller sibling of the first-gen Ryzen processors, the R7 1700, a CPU well praised by the tech community back in 2017 as true champion of price-to-performance ratio. Despite its lower thermal design power and humble stock frequency, the 8-cores 12 threads processor has exactly the same architecture design as the pricier Ryzen 7 1800X and 1700X. And with a quick and easy overclock, the R7 1700 is able to catch or even outperform, in some cases, its bigger brothers. To make the story spicier, we drop into the benchmarking arena AMD's arch enemy, the Intel Core i7 2700K, a CPU that remained unbeaten by each and every AMD processor made before the Ryzen era. If you want to know more about the specifications of hardware and software we use to run the benchmarks, check out the description below. Our first game wasn't what you might expect it to be used as stress testing tool, but to our surprise, Minecraft, under the right adjustments, was more than capable to melt down the R7 1700. At 1080 resolution, 76 times rendering distance and 16 times anti-aliasing, we barely hit above 30 frames per second, with the 1% low dropping to 18. Curiously enough, the i7 1700K could produce better results with 57 average and 50 at 1% low. I don't know why this was the case. Temperature-wise, there wasn't any sign of overheating. I toggled Ryzen's SMT using 8 cores with all the threads disabled. I even dropped the frequency and the voltage, but despite my efforts, the R7 1700 was unable to give better results. Same thing happened while I was playing Genshin Impact at 1080 high settings and the FPS uncapped. The R7 1700 gave some very high numbers, and while I was happy about it, when I saw the i7 2700K pulling off on average 14 more FPS, my head suddenly filled with past disturbing memories. What I did next was to immediately remove the CPU block of the AIO cooler from the AMD ring to be sure that I wasn't using a bulldozer CPU on it, and then I double-checked again. My only unapproved assumption for the inability of R7 1700 to beat the ancient i7 2700K is that both Minecraft and Genshin Impact are optimized only for Intel processors. This explanation would ease my mind to move on into the integrated benchmark of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Hopefully, with this modern AAA title, I could see at last some normal results. Running the integrated benchmark at 1080p medium preset, the R7 1700 gave some great numbers with 95 and 68 average and 1% low respectively. But to my disappointment, the same results gave also the i7 2700K. Marvelous. It's going to be a trend, isn't it? Not exactly. If you check out the MSI layout and the final results, even at low settings the GPU is obviously bottlenecking the system. So it is what it is. And please, don't ask me to run everything at 720 to prove the obvious. And you know what? I don't care anymore, or maybe I'm scared of what might the outcome be. It doesn't matter, so we'll move on into one more Ubisoft's latest and greatest title. The integrated benchmark of Far Cry 6 at 1080 high settings was the proof that I was indeed testing a R7 1700 processor. Despite the minor CPU bottlenecking, the 70 average and 58 FPS at 1% low was indicating a smooth gameplay experience. On the other hand, the i7 1700K did okay, but fell 7 frames short on both average and 1% low. With a huge relief, I wiped the sweat from my forehead and I continue with the Division 2. One more in-game benchmark for our contestants. The R7 1700 with 121 and 83 average and 1% low did quite well despite the minor bottlenecking that caused the delayed rendering of some trees. Not far behind, the i7 2700K scored 117 and 73 FPS respectively, but with the bottlenecking status being more pronounced. Halo Infinite on multiplayer mode and 1080p high settings made both CPUs to work hard for the win, but the Ryzen was far superior, achieving frames well above the 60 mark. The i7 2700K did also well, but with the 1% low falling quite behind the magic number 60. To induce artificially a CPU bottleneck, I downscaled the resolution to 767 pixels and ran this time the multiplayer mode at medium preset. Here it was more clear that the R7 1700 could handle the situation quite well, keeping the balance between the CPU and GPU rendering time. I can't say the same for the i7 1700K that under these circumstances couldn't follow suit, causing the RTX 2060 at times to work at 80% capacity. For the next one, I could omit from the test the CPU-intensive Hitman 3 Dartmoor benchmark. This one at 1080p high settings caused some very clear bottlenecks on both CPUs. The R7-1700 had a decent average of 83 frames per second, but a poor output of 36 frames at 1% low. The i7-2700K got wrecked, with a 1% low dropping to 10 frames, and the stuttering mess was very strong on this one. One more benchmark that potentially can destroy a CPU is included inside the game Riftbreaker. On this one, both CPUs suffered bottlenecking wounds, and for reasons both gave the same FPS results. Other than the article I found with the developers of Riftbreaker openly admitting that their game are highly optimized for Intel processors, I wasn't going to investigate further this or any other life's mystery. So I moved on to the next non-discriminating benchmark integrated on Shadow of the Tomb Raider. At 1080 and high preset, the R7-7000 had no problem at all to provide a pretty smooth frame time, with the lowest FPS staying above the high 80s. Even though a bit behind on the rendering tasks, the CPU worked almost hand to hand with the GPU. The i7-2700K did its best, but at times barely could hold the 1% low above 20 FPS, giving occasional stutters here and there. The R7-1700 was the clear winner on the Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and that was also the case for the next test running the Siege benchmark of Total War Saga Troy. High settings or high resolution made the graphics card the weakest link of the system, so I had to drop the resolution at 720 and choose medium settings. Watching again the Ryzen struggling to fit with data the GPU was a revelation on how you can sabotage your own hardware by choosing lower settings in order to achieve higher frames, or creating YouTube videos by artificially bottlenecking your PC, of course. The i7-2700K suffered a worse fate and was 18% slower. Obviously, the above experiment is to compare the weaknesses of our contestants. Otherwise, even at 1080p, both CPUs are capable to run this game very well. Finally, I left for the end the benchmark of Forza Horizon 5. At 1080p low settings, the R7-1700 was unable to keep up with the RTX 2060. Undoubtedly, the high frames are indicating that medium or even high settings will remove the bottleneck. As you can see, or better put, you can't see, there is no footage for the i7-2700K on this one, mainly because I lost my patience with the cranky Xbox application and the fact that I have to download 110GB every time I want to run the game on a fresh installed Windows 10 system. I believe by now you probably have a good picture of how both CPUs are doing in 2022 on gaming. But what about productivity tasks, you will ask? And that is a very legit question. So here we have Cinebench R23 testing both processors side by side under a heavy rendering task. On single core with score 10,026, the R7-1700 is 10% faster than the i7-2700K, giving a performance almost matching a 3rd gen AMD Ryzen 3 31000. On multi-core test, the R7-1700 totally destroys the old Intel CPU with a score of 99,018 points. That is 10% slower compared to a Ryzen 5 5600G. Blender benchmark is one more wide-known rendering test. Running 3 different scenes, the CPU that will produce higher numbers is the winner, and the final result was what you would expect, with the R7-1700 being more than 2 times faster than i7-1700K. 7zip, beyond being an excellent free file compression program, it is also a great tool to test how fast the CPU is capable to compress and decompress data. Again, the R7-1700 was twice faster. Video encoding is one more very common task for almost every content creator. Using Handbreak to encode a 10 minutes and 34 seconds MP4 video file, the R7-1700 finished the task in about 5.5 minutes, while the i7-2700K needed twice the time. And with that, we reached the end of 1001 bottlenecking tests. Aside from some quirky results, the R7-1700 was the clear winner on both single and multi-core performance in almost every game and productivity application we ran against Intel's Sandy Bridge Champion, a 2011 microarchitecture that remained undefeated by AMD for 6 long years. As such, 2017 was the year of Ryzen that liberated every PC user from Intel's mundane reality of 4 cores, 8 threads, high-end desktop computers. And in 2022, the Ryzen 7 1700 is still a very capable CPU to build your workstation rig and good enough to play games despite the occasionally bottlenecks. With a used B350, X370, B450 or even a X470 motherboard, while also taking advantage of price deflation of GPU market, buying a used GTX 1660 or an RX 5500, you can create a very well balanced and affordable 8 cores, 16 threads computer system. Moreover, AMD's M4 platform is still upgradable, giving the opportunity to replace in the near future the R7-1700 with a 3rd gen Ryzen processor. Additionally, the PCI Express 3 bus will remain relevant for a few more years, given that you will avoid combining it with some of the memory bandwidth limited graphics cards that both Nvidia and AMD are offering. As for the Intel i7-2700K, I wouldn't build a computer with it, nor would I throw it in the trash. If you are the proud owner of this legendary chip, you will be more than able to enjoy running game titles without any major problems. However, anything above medium settings on modern demanding PC games will bottleneck heavily the i7-2700K, thus my advice is to plan as soon as possible a PC build based upon a more recent platform. Beyond all that, I would like to close the main story of this video reminding the simple fact that Zen architecture was only the first of many successful strategic steps that led AMD's next-gen Ryzen processors catching up to Intel's counterparts in both single and multi-core performance, while offering, at least for the Zen and Zen Plus architecture, unbeatable prices. 53 years ago, Walter Jeremiah Sanders founded a company with the mentality of never surrendering, tough to die underdog. Today, Dr. Lisa Su has managed to open the paths for a sustainable and healthy economy while turning AMD's mentality into a fierce conqueror. To that notion and the fact that you are still watching, it will be great to know your thoughts about this little story. In case that you want to support our channel, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you don't want to miss the next video upload, then hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.